I think if you wanted to achieve restorative justice when it came all of this stuff, then what you had to do was simply acknowledge any of the bad things you've done in the past, but you haven't. So I don't think the idea of you now doing this rebranding tour is anything more than you just seeing the writing on the wall. That's ultimately what this all is. You knew what was happening to your peers, and you were smart enough and astute enough to walk away from it.
You're such a bitch, Lance.
Okay.
Bring it up.
Well,
Let's go.
All right, chatters, I'm taking you back in time, and I'm telling a story that goes back to around when I first started doing left-wing political content here on YouTube. Now, I started out by making prepared content. I would upload those videos and edit them, script them, and for a while I was putting out one scripted, edited, prepared video per day, until eventually I started to get pretty burnt out on that and I started streaming. But back when I was making prepared content, I had one of my videos signal boosted and my channel shouted out by a YouTuber, or I should say YouTubers, and that channel was called The Serfs. And that video, the video that I made, was about women in the gaming community and the kind of shit they go through, right? And that video got signal boosted by Lance from The Serfs. Very cool. And from there, me and the Serfs, we became friends, right? Maybe not friends, but, acquaintances, allies, and things were going great for a while. But one day, I got a weird tingle up my spine, like, shit, someone who doesn't like me, or someone who used to like me, no longer does anymore. I feel like something bad's happened. And it actually wasn't a tingle that went down my spine. It was my chat. People in my chat sent me clips from Twitch streams of Lance, I wouldn't necessarily say talking shit, but being a little overzealous in their criticism of me. Perhaps a little mean-spirited, a little, it was shit-talking. I'm trying to sugarcoat it. It was shit-talking. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was shit-talking. And I thought maybe it was all in good fun, or maybe I'd done something at that point that just particularly pissed him off, but sure enough, I mean, he used to follow me, and then I checked Twitter, and he'd unfollowed me. And that'd been the case for a while. Now, something you gotta know about Lance, our boy here, who's the main focus of this video, is Lance is... Now, I need you guys to be very mature about this, okay? I don't want to see any racism or bigotry of any kind here, all right? These are immutable characteristics we're going to talk about. Lance is a Canadian. I know. I ask that you guys remain mature. Good time for my chat to die right there. Good time for the chat to die, because you just know my chat was going to be filled with horrible things to say about Canadians, frankly. Lance is Canadian, and the reason why this is relevant is because a very popular right-wing, arguably white nationalist figure, depending on who you ask, Lauren Southern, is also Canadian. Now, Lauren Southern, back in the day, was one of the largest and furthest right YouTubers you could really find in the mainstream, someone who had as many subs and as much attention as she had. Lance, as a Canadian, a left-wing Canadian, and Lauren Southern, as a right-wing Canadian, the Serfs kind of had like this emotional stake in covering Lauren Southern and responding to her videos, and perhaps even one day debating Lauren Southern. However, on one fateful day, I saw a screenshot or an image from Lauren Southern's children's book that she'd written on Twitter. And that particular page, I took a little umbrage with it, let's just say. I had some problems with that page. So I quote tweeted it, and I asked my followers if they had any screenshots or other sources for me to see pages of the book so that I could respond to some of the bits of it on stream. And believe it or not, Lauren Southern herself goes on to quote tweet me, send me a page of the book for free, and then offer, for like, I think a discount or a free copy, I think it was. Maybe a free copy, I can't remember. I actually still have it right here on my bottom shelf here. It's a little dusty. I haven't pulled it out in a while, but this little book right here, little kid's book, it's got there's some conservative memes in here, there's some conservative memes. You see this conservative meme? X is for censorship. I ended up not taking as much issue with as I thought I would overall, but there were certainly still quite a few pages worth responding to. And so I decided to say, okay, I'll buy the book, but, you know, recognizing she's a pretty large figure, I'd like to talk to her about it, perhaps even debate about it a little bit after I read it and review it on stream, and she agrees. And we talk a little bit in DMs, organizing this and getting it all set up, and the day comes. Well, before the day comes, the word gets out about this. And a few people, most notably Lance, had a big problem with this. Especially Lance's community, the Serfs community. A lot of those people started coming out, saying that I should not debate Lauren Southern because I'm platforming her, for starters, which is hysterical, comparing YouTube channels and general popularity between the two of us, as well as claiming I am not a good enough debater to responsibly debate Lauren Southern. Now, I'm no god-tier debater, but if I have an opportunity to talk to Lauren Southern, well, I'm gonna fucking take it. However, all we were really debating about was like low tier, not super high stakes culture war issues, and the response to the debate was pretty mixed. There were some people who thought I did extremely well, some people who fall more into my camp that say I did okay. There were some parts where I think I did pretty well, which I suppose in its own right is impressive when going up against someone with as much media training as Lauren Southern. So I was pretty happy with myself overall, but Lance and his community were not happy. They were quite upset. In fact, I got canceled pretty hard following that debate. I didn't get upset about it. I didn't freak out on Twitter. As much as I wanted to freak out at Lance on Twitter and shit talk him, I didn't, because I was afraid that it would come off as seeming like a sore loser. However, a little while later following this, our boy Lance debates a very well-known Nazi and eugenicist and just overall creep by the name of J.F. Gariepi. Now, J.F. destroyed Lance. My girlfriend Lonnie told me how it went. I couldn't bear to watch it myself. This was on eugenics, I believe was what they were debating. Like a serious topic. A serious topic. And Lance got BTFO'd. I could have been a very spicy cunt. Interesting that Lance would cancel me and send his audience to shit-talk me and call me a bad debater when he gets publicly owned all the time. But I held back. I decided to just be chill. However, Lance recently agreed to do his dream debate against Lauren Southern. I have yet to see this debate, and we're about to watch it at probably 1.75 times speed or something, because it's 2 hours long. Lance got destroyed so badly. Lauren Southern DM'd me on Twitter today and complimented me, and said that Lance was a fucking idiot, and that talking to me was far more enjoyable and enlightening and productive than any conversation she could have had with Lance. When Lance fucks up worse, but in the same way that I did in his perceived view, I can't help but be a cunt. So I'm sorry, guys, but this is going to be us reacting to Lance's supposedly horrendous performance in this debate with Lauren Southern.
Wonderful. Now we're going to go into prepared statements. Now let me clarify for the audience what we're going to be talking about today so there's no confusion. The topics that were given to me was that the debate will be primarily about retributive and vigilante justice for historical wrongs, and there might be some secondary discussions, if time permits it, about the recent burning of Catholic churches in Canada, the recent discovery of the unmarked Indigenous graves in the same nation, and the actions of the Canadian government in the past, if it could fall under the historical definition of genocide. Do we all agree on the discussed topics? That there's no confusion?
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, we will start with counterpoints with a prepared 2-minute statement. You will be timed.
All right, a little bit of background on counterpoints. He is a boomer. He has a child. He gets voted off of Hippy Dippy Rumble pretty quickly, usually. Well, actually not very quickly. He sticks around for a while, but He has a tendency not to talk much, which is sad because I actually like counterpoints. He's actually pretty cool. I wish he'd talk more during debates because he kind of got steamrolled during the hippy dippy thing, and he ended up getting voted off. And I was like, oh, well, goodbye, Connor. Now we're stuck here with Sproutacus, which is still fun in its own way. But yeah, counterpoints probably one of the most reasonable conservatives I've ever seen. Pretty cool dude, actually. Pretty cool dude. We've got Lance, who we have already gone into detail on. We've got Dylan, who is a hippie teenager who is the youngest foreign policy advisor in America. And he's a motherfucker who runs a fuckers game of a debate podcast that I will take my revenge on. I will have my justice met out when I get the belt that was so wrongfully stolen from me when Dylan executive action kicked me out of the thing for a miscommunication on his end, by the way, I would argue. I know Caesar. This person, explain themselves. I don't know anything about this person. Never seen their content before. Never heard their voice before. Do not know who they are. And Lauren Southern, who we know who she is.
And I will give you a warning once you have about 20 seconds left.
Yeah, so in preparation for this debate, I think the primary thing that I landed on was the fact that burning churches is just unacceptable. I understand that there's a contentious history in Canada, but there's no real excuse for throwing a Molotov cocktail inside of a building. You can have descriptive reasons, much like riots. You can understand why something is going on, but you probably can't morally justify it. So that's the number one contention that I would have. Number two.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. We need to stop doing any defensive rioting whatsoever. If anyone is doing it, just let's 2x speed weird champ. No, this is 2 hours long, motherfucker. We're 7 minutes in, and I've already been recording for 33. We're gonna have to really start skipping around. When it comes to BLM or any progressive movement, you can't make excuses for riots. I know that like morally, you can make excuses for riots and have a completely logical, like reasoning, but optically speaking, people don't like riots. They don't. Like things have to be really bad for the general population to be cool with rioting. It's just something that you have to say, yeah, I don't agree with the rioting, but here's why they're doing it. And I understand that the reason that they're doing it is also a problem. I think that's probably the best way to do that. Rioting is the language of the unheard. Yeah, but the heard don't give a fuck about the unheard. That's the thing, though. If you're trying to convince a bunch of cis, white, straight gamer boys who are absolutely heard, who are watching this and whose opinions could be changed in this debate, they don't want to they don't want some other group that doesn't apply to them being appealed to in that debate. It's not going to interest them. You have to appeal to the audience you're trying to pull over. I mean, I agree, Dirge Professor. Just it wouldn't be a good point optically speaking or rhetorically speaking in any way.
Two, when it comes to Indigenous history, I think that the audience will probably be surprised, or hopefully they're not surprised, that there is a lot of concession for the sins of the past and all that kind of stuff, and we can get into that. I'm interested to talk about definitions because obviously the word genocide is being brought into this conversation, so I want to talk about that as an aspect of this. And then ultimately, I think this conversation is indicative of where we are at as a continent as a whole. Europeans conquered this continent.
All right. So, oh my God, genocide is a tricky word, but I tend to use it a little bit more liberally because if you refuse to do that, you run into a situation where defenders of genocides will try to nitpick at your definitions. A good example of this are tankies when talking about the Holodomor or the Uyghur genocide happening in China. They'll really try to pick at those little wounds you leave them if you make your definition of genocide too tight. I think... So the thing is, if you look at any genocide in history, it never happened overnight. It wasn't like one day everything was good, then the next day we were, there was 1 million or 6 million dead Jews, right? That's not how genocides work. The way genocides work is through a cultural and political movement towards some type of reactionary ideology that leads down the pathway of deciding, okay, we have to kill these undesirables. It is a long process that takes a lot of, cultural upheaval on the part of these political reactionary aggressors. But it's a long process in stages, and you can't be too afraid to call out what might end up being a full-on genocide because it's too early in the stages, because it very well may get further if you don't call it out then. And I think while maybe Canada wasn't literally doing a Holocaust, like a Nazi-style Holocaust to the natives, as far as I'm aware, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it really was that bad. What they were doing may not have been that, but it was very well, had nothing been, no action been taken, no political change made, could have gotten to that level when it came to what Canada did to the Native Americans living there.
And then colonized this continent and did some nefarious stuff in order to do that. We have done sins in the past. Now we have to reckon with those sins and move forward as a society. So I'm hoping that we can kind of, even if it's very uncomfortable, even if it's contentious, I'm hoping that maybe we can do that here a little bit. And I'll leave it there. And we can go.
Wonderful. With 48 seconds to spare. Now we're going to throw it over to Lauren Southern.
Hey, okay, so I've written a little something, haven't written anything else for the debate, but today we have framed this debate as a discussion, obviously, around retributive and vigilante justice, and whether or not Canada is guilty of genocide. But what we are debating in reality here is acts of political terrorism, the committing of hate crimes, the burning down of religious sites, including the recent burning down of refugee churches, and those who are hell-bent on making excuses for this behavior, all based on the recent discovery of mass graves of Indigenous children, which activists have portrayed as evidence of genocidal actions by the Canadian government, which were covered up. The only problem with this entire debate is, firstly, even if this happened and the Canadian government committed genocide, there would be no excuse to commit hate crimes today, especially against people who had no connection to said actions. And an equally important and shocking revelation should be, is that no mass graves were found in the first place. This is an entirely false narrative. No one here today.
So, I don't know much about this mass grave thing in Canada. I know, like, the bare minimum, but not enough that I really feel comfortable making, like, any definitive statements about it. I just don't know enough about it. I'm not a Canadian. Canadian news doesn't interest me as much because there's so much shit happening here in America. How can I keep up with most other countries at the same time? There's only so many black pills I can take every day from learning what's going on in my own country. God knows what Canada and the UK have, how many black pills Canada and the UK have waiting for me when I start learning about what's going on with them. However, that is a question that I have. What is the point of the political upheaval being caused by the news about these mass graves, these supposed mass graves being found? I would guess it would be to make it more well known and aware that the Canadian government did this and have this be taught in schools as to properly educate students on a non-whitewashed version of their country's history. But besides that, I mean, rioting's not really going to solve that problem, really. I don't really know if there is rioting happening, which it sounds like there is. I don't know what the point of that is, frankly. There's no reason to defend that.
Today is going to deny historical injustices happened. No one is going to deny there were deliberately children taken from their homes and educated to no longer have their culture and language, and that is horrific. I don't think that should happen to anybody. However, distorting the past, exaggerating atrocities, inventing the existence of mass graves to make it appear as though Canada committed and covered up some sort of Holocaust is a horrific mishandling of the truth, and it does nothing to help us uncover and heal from genuine wrongdoings which occurred. And in fact, it has caused more trauma today for Canadians and Indigenous communities who are now seeing their communities destroyed, their churches burnt to the ground, and relations ripped apart even further.
Okay, 7 seconds to spare. We're now going to throw it over to Lance from the Serfs.
Hey everybody, so I'm going to say right out of the gates that neither me or my partner support or condone the burning of any religious institutions. What we're here today to talk about is obviously restorative and retributive justice in relation to the residential school system in Canada and the involvement of the Catholic Church therein. I'm going to try and say this as quickly and concisely as I can. The original founding father of this country, Sir John A. Macdonald, was a white nationalist, and I don't mean that in the sense that lefties like to call every single person they don't like a Nazi. He was a person who believed in the superiority of the Aryan race. He said it frequently. He, in Parliament, would say things that were considered to be outlandish and racist by the sign of the times.
This is all right
and
so
he
far.
started both the Indian Act in Canada and the reservation school system in Canada. He also instigated the reserve system in Canada. Now, for anyone who's unaware, the Indian reservation school system, what it essentially did was took 150,000 children away from their parents' arms and forcibly put them in institutions where they were systematically beaten, tortured, raped. They had their culture removed from them, their language, every aspect of them was...
You can't see it, but Lauren Southern is playing League of Legends right now. She's siphoned Destiny's debate power.
destroyed. Those who tried to escape would often die in the cold or drown in the water. So it was a horrifying experience by all accounts. Now, the Catholic Church themselves have never formally apologized for this. Neither have they been held to account for the thousands upon thousands of priests and nuns who, again, tortured and raped children. So I believe if we're going to be talking about restorative justice, the first place to begin would be that they have to both be held accountable for the crimes that they've committed, as well as the fact that they have to, in some form or another, pay retribution to those in which they've harmed. Thanks.
So, if I was a conservative, my argument against what Lance just said would be, even if this was real and this did happen, it happened so long ago. None of the people in power in Canada right now had anything to do with that. Nobody alive right now had anything to do with that. And do that and say, why should people who weren't even alive when this happened be held responsible? That would be my conservative response to that, depending on what time period these mass graves originate from, and that whole like kidnapping Native American children and re-educating them, type
with
thing.
18 seconds to spare. Now I'm going to throw it over to Tale of Two Rabbits for the last intro of the debate.
I would first like to thank Lance for asking me to join him today, and Dylan's Luscious Locks for moderating. I open, as I so often do, with a story. In 1601, Juan de Onate visited a gigantic agricultural and industrial center of more than 20,000 people in what is now central Kansas. Because he was a conquistador, he then kidnapped and tortured 4 children to identify the houses of the town's leaders, and immediately afterward, he waged a war to destroy the city with an army of nearly 1,000 soldiers. It was a mass slaughter. For the next 500 years, the school-taught history of the United States was that tribes of the plains were barely organized, semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers who knew only territorial wars and primitivism. And then, in 2016, using records, archaeological fieldwork, and remote sensing technology, Etzanoa once again became a fact. The stories natives had been telling for generations were finally again acknowledged as fact. As has happened many times in recent years, the U.S. was forced to again confront the cruelty and lies that had been perpetrated against the indigenous peoples right up to this very day. In May of 2021, using records, archaeological fieldwork, and remote sensing technology, the stories of the residential schools recorded by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report and told by natives for generations were finally again acknowledged as.
Wow, Canada fucking sucks. Why do Canadians don't get to get mad at me for shit talking their country anymore, okay? Like, I'd say comparatively nowadays, I feel like America overall nowadays treats Native Americans a little bit better than Canada does. Didn't all of like Oklahoma become native land recently too? It's funny, the day that like 2/3 of Oklahoma became native land was when me and Lonnie were driving through Oklahoma on our road trip from Florida to California. On that day that we drove through Oklahoma is when that happened. Maybe the day before. Nah, Doge Professor, you can't say that Canada treats the rest of the minority groups well. No, Canada had slavery, didn't it? You motherfuckers had slavery. You guys created... Lawrence Southern is from Canada, motherfucker. I'm sorry, but you're Canadian, all right? And that means you're barely human. I'm just kidding. Maybe I'm getting a little too spicy here. I want to skip ahead to the spicy bits, especially towards the end, because we've been recording for 44 minutes, and I want to get to the spice. I want to get to the spicy memes.
So tell me, where have the mass graves been found?
Well, the story that kicked it off was the Kempelus residential school mass graves that were identified using ground-penetrating radar.
Right, and ground-penetrating radar cannot detect bodies.
Are you saying that as an assertion?
Clip last night.
Absolutely, you can go look this up. In fact, the woman who conducted the GPR...
This is the one part of the debate that I've seen, and my first reaction to it was they're debating about this topic, and Lauren Southern is getting them on whether or not ground-penetrating radar can detect dead bodies. How little research do they do for this then? That's like one of the first things I'd want to find out in this debate. Like, hold on, is it possible for this to have actually happened?
Herself actually went to my university. She said herself.
But it could detect graves though. I read it and it looks. I think I found that it was debunked what Lauren said. There was an article about how they found those mass graves, and apparently it's not just ground penetrating radar. There were a few other tools and other shit that was going into it as well that helped them locate it. It wasn't just GPR. There was some other stuff there too that they used to find the disturbances beneath the ground that were very likely a mass grave. It looked very, very much like a mass grave, just in the general anomaly. It's very similar to how we like detect the existence of a black hole. We don't necessarily see the black hole, but we pick up energy and the bending of light and just signs that it's there. And we're like, okay, there's a black hole there. We can't see it. It's a black hole. But like light bends around it, and there's certain like radiation or something it puts off. It's kind of like that. You know what I mean? Haven't some already been dug up? Yeah, I believe some have, but conservatives are claiming that those are just like some schoolyard. Sometimes kids died back in the day, and schools had cemeteries, and maybe it was that. That seems to be like the common conservative response to that.
We cannot confirm anything. This is simply an assumption based on, and I would encourage people watching to go and take a look at what images ground-penetrating radar show. They just show anomalies in the ground. They don't give you any context. They don't tell you if bodies are there. The anomalies could appear to be graves. Do they know if this grave site is just an overgrown graveyard? Do they know if it was the community graveyard? Do they know if there are any bodies in what these ground anomalies look like? No. And this is the facts of the case. The woman who did the ground penetration test in Kamloops, which sparked this all off, stated, we cannot know if there are any bodies under here until someone has dug this up and they've exhumed the bodies, if they are there. And not only that, but the tribe leader there in Canada of the Kamloops band that brought out the initial statement about this said, even if there are bodies under the ground here, it's not a mass grave. And these are just preliminary findings, which has been the general consensus of all of these grave sites found, that they are not mass graves, and portraying it as such is deliberately misstating the truth and trying to make it seem as though Canada were committing some Holocaust where they were lining children up, shooting them, and throwing them in a grave that they dug, when we are talking about graveyards, if there are any bodies at all.
Okay, you just said that the woman who did the GPR examination went to college with you. The director of the company that actually did it is a man named Julio. So who did you go to school with?
No, she's an instructor at the university I went to. And I mean, I can read her name here. So this is the girl who did the GPR technology test, which once again, GPR cannot pick up organic matter. Her name was Sarah Belliou. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm terrible with French names. So she conducted the search herself, and she stated, nothing she has found can be confirmed unless excavations are done at the scene.
Oh, I just remembered French Canadians exist. Imagine being French and Canadian, dude. Oh. XQC moment. That's a juicer, man. What a juicer.
These excavations have not happened.
I didn't hear Tail to Rabbits.
So this is from the Globe and Mail.
Hold on.
Give me a moment. I was trying to hear. Give me. Okay, let me just start. When I'm talking, nobody else is supposed to talk. I didn't hear what Tail to Rabbits was saying earlier. Could you repeat what you were trying to say?
Well, at this point, I'm a little bit lost. She's friends with someone whose name she doesn't know how to pronounce, who isn't the director of the company who was hired to do the scanning. So at this point, I don't understand exactly what it is we're discussing. I thought we were here to discuss burning of churches and restorative justice. If you'd like to challenge GPR and whether or not it's efficacious in the use of archaeological remains, I would point you to Etzanoa. Are you also challenging the identification of literally every site in the Americas that has...
Can I jump ahead?
Wait, I would let Tail to Rabbits finish what they were trying to say. Can you finish that?
Because this is outside the scope of this conversation. I keep hearing affirmations of, oh, well, I know a person. I don't care that you know a person. I am talking about the company that did the work.
I'm talking about the woman who every Canadian article has stated did the search in Kamloops. And anyone can look this up. Go look up who did the GPR test in Kamloops. I'm reading the Globe and Mail right now. The title, Anthropologist Explains How She Concluded 200 Children Were Buried at Kamloops Residential School.
Counterpoint, stop raising your hand and just get in there, my man. Come on. Just so you know, most Canadians don't like French Canadians, so you're kind of in the same boat here with a lot of Canada. Yeah, but I hate the French and the Canadian. Dude, are people going to start to think that I actually hate Canadians and French people? I wonder, like, I'm surprised that, like, Lauren Southern didn't say, so Xanderhal, I've been doing some Googling, and I found some clips of you talking about Canadians. I gotta say, I don't appreciate it. I'm surprised that hasn't happened yet to me.
Okay, stop right there. Stop right there. How she concluded the 215 bodies were buried.
And
so,
once again, that's just media bullshit, because the article literally says she also stressed her findings cannot be confirmed unless excavations are done at the scene.
Can I jump ahead between the two of y'all?
Okay, 1 second. Lance was trying to say something before you, and so I wanted to make sure he got a chance to speak.
No, I want Tail to finish what he's saying, and then I'll go after counterpoints.
Okay, then we'll have Tail finish what he's saying, then we'll move over to counterpoints.
Okay.
If she would like to challenge the findings of basic archaeology, then she's welcome to do so, but that's not why we're here, as I was led to believe.
You made this accusation against me. I responded, and I'm citing the individual who made these findings.
Oh god, can I bridge these two fucking perspectives, please? Because otherwise we're gonna spend the whole time on fucking minutia.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and bridge these two perspectives for the love of God. The primary contention is not, GPR or whether or not kids died or anything like that. The whole reason is the use of definitions and words. Ultimately, I would like to avoid semantics, and instead of fighting over semantics, I would like to talk about the concepts that we're trying to convey. The main objection that I think Lauren is poking to, that I would poke to as well, is basically the use of mass graves. When we use words like mass graves, basically what I conceptualize is people handed shovels, marched out into the woods, executed, and then thrown in shallow graves, and then dirt loosely thrown over them. Okay, that's the primary contention here, is whether or not that's what's occurred. And based off of historical fact, which I'm sure Tale of Two Rabbits and the Serfs can assert, one way or the other, whether or not they agree with this, that's not what happened. They didn't march out 200 kids into the woods, execute them one at a time, throw them in a ditch, and throw dirt over them. And I have more points to this, but I just want to let's just bridge this gap on the definition of mass graves and keep it moving.
Okay, you haven't said anything yet. Would you like to speak at all?
Yeah, totally. So, Lauren, you're already starting out with conspiracy theories. Whether or not you agree with the way the technology is being used, that's really not up for debate right now. Because at the end of the day, the people who have been accused.
She was citing the person who did the process that found she was citing the lady that found or supposedly found these mass graves. Like, you got to respond to that. Your response can't just be like you're being conspiratorial when she's citing the quote from the person who found the graves. That's not the best look.
Used right now of accomplishing these crimes, they in no short form have already you've received a condolence from the Pope as an acknowledgement that something has happened here. There has been multiple instances, such as the Mohawk tribe, that have actually had to exhume bodies after ground penetration had been used. This is not something in which the ground penetration.
Soy! That's the tribe that Connor Kenway was from in Assassin's Creed 3. I remember that. Assassin's Creed 3 was a good game. Don't care what anybody says. The remaster is dog shit. I played the remaster, and it's like, oh my god, they downgraded everything. Like, the gameplay is good, but the cutscenes are just... Can someone just mod in the old cutscenes, please? Because, god, they look awful.
Penetrating radars discovered these bodies, and then suddenly we don't have any idea about whether or not this is occurring. Also, the testimonies that have been given in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which are numerous, we're talking thousands and thousands of people, have attested to the treatment of the children in these residential schools. Once again, that is not a matter up for, did they line them up against the walls and shoot every single one of them in the face? That is not exactly what happened here. Once they became wards of the state, as in once they became the property of the federal government or the provincial government, their treatment then became their responsibility. So whether they died from experimental starvation, which is something that happened, whether they died from high rates of tuberculosis, which is something that happened, whether they died from torture, rape, or abuse, which is something that happened, 1 in 5 children was sexually abused in these schools. That was sexual abuse that was happening while, again, they were children as wards of the state. So it doesn't matter how you want to try and skirt past whether or not these crimes had occurred.
Okay, I'd like to address that.
Sure.
So, I'm.
Do you want to give? It was towards Lauren, but are you okay with counter responding?
Yeah, he can respond. Actually, Connor, can I just quickly make one clarification and then I'll jump to you? I never stated atrocities didn't happen at these schools. It was a very unfortunate thing in the 1800s and 1900s, early 1900s, particularly in general, that there were horrific things going on at orphanages, boarding schools, residential schools, of course, and there's proof of this. But you have asserted, and I don't want to see you walk back on this unless you're going to admit it, that these were mass graves. You have asserted that they are evidence of genocide when the very chiefs of these tribes, who you're saying are talking about the lived experience in the area, have stated these are not mass graves. Some of these, if the bodies are found, we don't know whose graves they even are. They could be a mix of settler children as well who died of tuberculosis. And there was a pandemic going on at this time that the residential schools were at their peak. These could be various reasons, but they were not mass graves. And that is what I'm calling you out on. That's what I'm calling out all these activists on that have made this claim. And dying of tuberculosis, dying of disease, well, of course, we can talk about the horrific conditions. To say that people were intentionally trying to give children tuberculosis, I think is absurd. But I'll let Connor keep going.
Yeah, so I just want to jump ahead descriptively because at the end of the day, like this is what I guess frustrates me about this conversation. So we can describe wrongs and evils on a spectrum, and we can just acknowledge that they're evil and that they're wrong. So, for instance, Lauren and I are both parents. If our children were taken from us, forcibly taught another language, wards of the state, and then by the way, like the demographic.
Lauren is rolling them. I'm sorry. Yeah. A little bit. Things are looking a little rough here. Lauren's smiling and Lance looks somewhat upset. I'm curious what just happened here.
Taught their culture, and we can talk about how that could be a problem, but to compare that to the residential schools where children were being ripped away from their families is just not even on the same level, and I find that extremely disingenuous.
Sure. So if that's the dumbest thing you've ever heard in your life, you've lived a more privileged life than I thought possible. And I'm just going to say this, the burden of proof would then be upon you. If you're going to assert that this school doesn't really constitute a residential school because at the end of the day, nothing bad happened here related to the same systems in place from the other residential schools in Canada, then again, please demonstrate that with some kind of factual evidence.
I mean, okay, so the Canadian government argued that it wasn't a residential school, but, and I'm telling you, sure, it is registered as a residential school, but the reason is this individual who wanted to get compensation was able to make the argument, I was removed from my family to go to an education system which did not uphold my language. And the removal from the family was voluntary. His claim that it was his only option, and he claims that he was told he should go there, even though he only has a signed affidavit and no proof of that. People can go read the case themselves. So like, I'm just saying, if you want to say that's what residential schools were and say that's the same as all the past ones, then I'm actually not.
You know what I think the interesting thing is here that I kind of noticed? Lauren Southern and Connor Points come off as far more knowledgeable on the topic than Lance and the other person whose name I still can't remember. Like, regardless of the content of what they're saying, Connor Points and Lauren just come off as more educated on this topic, which is not a good look. Not a good look, Lance and Bunny Boy.
Not feeling that bad for the past ones, but of course they're not the same. Of course. Like,
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that you're being caught in the pedantry of trying to assert that this one residential school doesn't count. When
No, my
at the end of the
point
day,
is the
my
schools
statement,
that-
and it
you're
remains the
saying
same, was that the
closed
last
in the
residential
90s.
school closed in.
Doge Professor! Doge Professor, explain this! Explain this, Doge Professor! Are you here? Explain. Explain, motherfucker.
1996. That is just a factual
Yes, but they were
statement.
not okay. Well, can we
Okay, and now
they
you
were
would like
not
to
the same
establish
as
on top of
the
that.
1800s?
Yes,
Can
and
we
if you
agree
want
they're
to,
not the same?
and can you establish then that nothing bad happened in that school? And if you can, fine. But at the end of the day, again, this is pedantry. It's just like
Okay,
this is
it's not
this is
pedantry.
probably one of the weakest
Wait,
gotchas I've seen so
clarify,
far.
then we'll go
It's
back.
not.
It was a
Lauren,
funny
right.
joke, Doge Professor. It was a joke.
So for another example of this and why it matters is some of the places called residential schools that retained the name residential schools well into the 80s and 90s were even run by native bands themselves. They were handed over. So if you're going to talk about how these residential schools were committing atrocities well into the 80s and 90s, then we're going to have to start punishing and asking for apologies from native bands themselves, like the Cowasses band, who held onto the residential school and ran it for 16 years. So yes, it does matter. What?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Bring up anecdotes, like depending on how you do it, can be extremely effective as a debate tactic. And I say debate tactic in the most genuine way possible. Like, yeah, no, actually, bringing up anecdotes gives the impression that you know just a lot about this topic. Like you've heard a lot about it, and you've heard stories about it and whatnot. I feel like that's part of why Lauren Southern is so effective with her rhetoric when she uses anecdotes. Destiny called it out very well, but it's a hard thing to do. To like try to debunk someone's anecdote they brought up, right?
Happened and what these schools turned into later on.
Either of you are free to respond.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know if Tail is still here.
At this point, I'm just baffled. So,
Okay,
so far,
I'll let you speak.
we've denied the Indian Act. We've denied the removal policy. We've denied that because one guy
How's Lance
said a
going?
bad thing incorrectly once, therefore all atrocities never happened. We've
No
denied
one's saying no
mass-
Yeah,
atrocities happened.
that's what we said.
Stop it.
Wait.
That's what we said.
Let's let him finish.
We've denied mass graves exist, even though the definition of mass is big. So at this point, I'm just lost. What definitions are we even working with? I'd really like some clarification on some of this. I mean,
So there's a
if we're going
graveyard,
to-
a mass grave?
if we're going to throw out the Indian Act as even a discussable topic, then feel free. I have no trouble with that, because as I was led to believe, the initial conversation was on restorative justice. If we're
Ooh. Actually debating the definition of big. Yeah. Ooh. I hate watching lefties lose. Listen, being a lefty means that you always have to watch lefties lose, okay? It's just part of life, okay? I want to see where's it get really spicy? Where's the scene? Where's the scene where Lauren calls Lance a bitch? I need to see it again.
And then turning the whole thing around to suddenly say that you're going to rebrand yourself as this wonderful new centrist,
Here it
and everything's
is.
wonderful, and that you write children's books now, and it's all ooh-woo, and everything's good now, and nothing bad ever happened. I think if you wanted to achieve restorative justice when it came all of this stuff, then what you had to do was simply acknowledge any of the bad things you've done in the past, but you haven't. So I don't think the idea of you now doing this rebranding tour is anything more than you just seeing the writing on the wall. That's ultimately what this all is. You knew what was happening to your peers, and you were smart enough and astute enough to walk away from it.
You're such a bitch, Lance.
Okay.
Bring it up.
Well,
Let's go. Talk to me. I'm staying right here. I'm not going
Oh yeah,
anywhere.
throw 7,000 accusations at me and then ask me to respond to them. That's great. Connor and I are going to have a chat with my chat. And if you want to not be a bitch boy and have a full conversation another time, we can do that. We'll arrange that.
Okay. You all have
Lance's chat is soy-facing about it, but I feel like Twitter had a bit of a different opinion, and I gotta say, Lauren Southern calling him a bitch boy was pretty spicy. It's pretty spicy. Like, what would have happened for Lance here, okay? Ideally, what would have happened would be Lance would have poked and prodded just barely enough to sort of get Lauren flustered and upset. And then to just sort of slip them in. You can't also slip them in all at once. You have to, like, bring it up subtly at times, you know, like, hey, remember this, remember that, remember this. You know what I mean? Like, kind of slide it in. You can't just dump it there. It looks so bad. It looks so eager. Like he's been waiting the whole debate to do that. And he was so eager. This is when leading up to my debate with Lauren Southern, I talked to Vosh multiple times in preparation, as well as I believe Demon Mama in preparation for it too. The biggest bit of advice they both gave me was do not do what Lance just did. Do not say, coming from the inspiration for the Christchurch shooting and the boats and the baguettes and the anecdote Andes and the so on and so on. Like, don't do that, because it makes you come off as desperate to make your debate opponent look bad, which makes it look like you're wrong on the issues. And that's what Lance just did, and it, I don't think it looked good.
Of a pleasant afternoon.
I'm right here, Lauren. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go talk to Connor.
I have to go join my family and my life, but I'm seriously, let's set this up for another time. Let's set this
Sounds
up for
good.
another time. I'm 100% for it. All right,
Sounds
see
good.
you later, bitch boy.
Have fun. Oh, well, I'm excited.
Can we rewatch that again? Can we get that again?
Pleasant afternoon.
I'm right here, Lauren. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go talk to Connor.
Yeah,
I
so
have to
Dylan
go
leaves.
join my family and my life, but I'm seriously, let's set this up for another time. Let's set this
Sounds
up for
good.
another time. I'm 100% for it. All right,
Sounds
see
good.
you later, bitch boy.
Have fun. Oh, well, I'm excited for that. That'll be one.
You ever just kind of get that spine tingle cringe? You don't want to, like, you have to, like, have demolished to have that reaction after the debate. Like, you can't, I don't know if you did well enough for the laugh bit there. I don't think you got that. You got called a bitch boy. And that wasn't a rage quit either. That wasn't even a rage quit, because that was the end of the debate. Just Dylan left. Dylan left because that was the end of the debate, and then she and Connor were going to talk on their streams, and then she just called him a bitch boy and left, like they were about to do, and said, we can do this again, which also looks very alpha, to say, yeah, let's do this again, bitch boy. Like, yeah, I fucking destroyed you, I'll do it again, you know? Which also comes off as very strong on her part. Ugh. I don't think he did awful, at least from what I saw. I mean, if I watched the whole fucking 2 hours, maybe I'd agree with more people on the internet, but I mean, I guess it is funny. She won? Oh, I would argue she probably won that debate. Yeah, she and Connor came off as, Connor and Lauren Southern came off as, one, from what I saw, more knowledgeable on the topics than Lance and the other person, as well as both of them came off as very exacerbated by their lack of knowledge, right? Like there's a lot to gain rhetorically from body language. If when your opponent is saying something, you make a confused face, not like, oh, I have no idea what they're talking about, but like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like if while someone's saying, if you as your debate opponent's saying something, if you look like, Sam Cedar's really good at it. Sam Cedar's really good at that. When someone he's on the line with is really stupid, he does this sort of at the camera while the person's talking. I can't fix the chat. Shut up. I can't fix it. I'm sorry. Yeah, like you weird champ at the camera, right? And that's what Lauren Southern and Connor Points were doing the whole time, while Lance had like this kind of weird smug smile on his face, which I feel like is off-putting on its own. I feel so bad for Lance. His videos are usually very good, but he still is in the beginning of his debate bro arc. Here's the thing. I want to be nice and agree with you, Melanie Y, but Lance would not and did not offer the same courtesy to me. Lance shit-talked me. Am I just tired? Or my eyes are so red. Am I just really tired or really high? I can't tell. Maybe it's a mix of both. He did not offer the same courtesy towards me, what is Lance, like a 30-year-old or something? I don't know. He's pretty old, right? And I'm like this. I was like this 21-year-old, 1 year into doing debates, debate bro type, and he got super pissed about my debate with Lauren. Let's just say it's funny seeing the shit go all full circle. Anyway, yeah, that was pretty disappointing. Lauren Southern's a good debater, but hey, listen, Lance finally got his dream debate with Lauren, and I hope it was good for him. I hope he had a good time. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a donation, subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell icon, follow me on Twitter and Twitter, Instagram, Discord, TikTok, all of that. You can also support me financially by donating, subscribing, gifting a sub, prime subbing, super chatting, or hit the join button to become a channel member. You can also buy merch or pledge me on Patreon, whatever you like. If you got the money for it, you don't need it for anything else, and you're just like, fuck this money, you can send it my way, and it helps me keep doing the channel. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a good one.